Just a quick reminder for you to like, subscribe, and rate this podcast so we can get your feedback and know how to make it better.
Hey, it's Ari. As we're going to kick off 2023, I'd like to start off with an episode that spends some time recapping a topic that came up time and time again in the podcast all last year. And that, of course, is workforce. Going to spend some time highlighting some of the lessons learned, I think some key takeaways that can allow people to listen to the podcast that are in the manufacturing ecosystem to really address and improve on some of the workforce challenges. Then I'm going to spend the second half talking about a topic that we don't talk enough about, but that's critical to all businesses, including manufacturing, or maybe even in particular manufacturing, and that's cybersecurity. So let's get into the workforce. When we think about workforce, there's three components that we've talked about over and over again this year that are critical for people to think about. One is building the ecosystem. The second one is recruiting. And the third one, arguably possibly even the most important one, is retention. And I want to talk about what we've heard from people and what we can summarize from all that about how these three areas are just so important to effectively addressing the workforce challenges and the workforce growth needs that so many manufacturers in Connecticut and frankly all across the country are facing. So let's start with building the ecosystem. We have heard over and over again about how various manufacturers invest their time and energy to build relationships with trade schools, with universities, with even high schools and elementary schools to help drive a belief in the community that manufacturing is a great place to have a career. Those of us that are in the space, that have been working around it for a long time, already know this. But as we often say, it is not the dark, dirty, dingy days of yesteryear, but the lean, green, and clean, high-tech manufacturing of the future that people need to get introduced to. And so many manufacturers are realizing that building the ecosystem, helping the community, parents, students, people that are in careers that maybe aren't going anywhere, who would be able to do something different if only they knew about the advantages of manufacturing. I think there's so many companies that are leaning into that. And we've talked about example after example of company that does it and benefits from it. Companies that have said, hey, I needed somebody in engineering. I called up University of Hartford. I asked them to give me some students. We ran some internships, got some great students. We talked about so many people that have get involved with the CTEC system, the Connecticut Trade School system, and how many great employees they've gotten out of that. And a lot of that comes from those relationships of building the ecosystem. Schools, regional sector partnerships, another big thing that's come out in 2022 and really been inspired. We hear about manufacturers not fighting against, but leaning into their regional sector partnerships and seeing what they can do to get involved with training programs, certificate programs, tons of manufacturers that say, hey, I'm here to help build the curriculum. You want to find a work study program? Do it here at our facility. And all these little things from each manufacturer that does that helps to build the broader ecosystem. And that I think over time will really help support and continue to support the growth of manufacturing. I think we know that there are things about growth in manufacturing that we're all taking advantage of, nearshoring, greater demand in general, the idea that we can make things here in this country again and our higher economic competitiveness. And also there's the silver tsunami, right? The retiring wave. So there's a road ahead of us where we know we're going to need employees, and building that ecosystem is going to be so important to doing it. We recently did a show at the ACM trade show. The first half of that entire trade show has over 100 manufacturers just being there, coming in to show what they do and how they do it to over 1,000 students. That's so powerful. I think the more we can do that and get in front of people who might be interested in manufacturing, students, people looking for a career change or how to upskill or get more out of their career, there's so many opportunities that we can do to get there. So I think building that ecosystem is going to be so vastly important. Second thing I mentioned was recruiting. Look, we have to get out there to find the people we want for sure. And the thing we've heard about people that are being successful is they're doing what I like to call meeting people where they are. Long gone are the days where we throw out a help wanted sign on the building, put an ad in the paper or put an ad on Career Builder and just find all the people that we need. Right now, we need to find people where they are. If we're looking for young people, we should be where young people's eyes and attention are, on their phone. We've got to get in front of them that way. And so whether it's TikTok, whether it's Instagram, but finding people where they are, running ads. Get creative with your content. Make something interesting. Manufacturers, more so than, say, lawyers, accountants, more than IT folks, right? They have the advantage. We have the advantage. You have the advantage of having something that's really cool to look at. Watching a machine build something allows us to create really interesting content that will bring people in. People that like working with their hands, that have a proclivity for mechanical items, mechanical aptitude, they're going to be brought in by these videos. So the platforms themselves actually lend themselves to what we want to share and show. And I think we're not taking as much advantage as we could, but we hear about the successes people are having who do it. And so just highly recommend looking at that, right? If we want to find young people, go to where young people are. But at the same time, if we're looking for people that are more experienced, that maybe want to look at a career change, we want to find people that are getting trainings or new trainings, we should meet them where they are too. The nice part about this is that's very similar to building the ecosystem. Where can we go and find folks that might want to be doing a career move or a career change? Community colleges, great place to partner. Connecticut's community colleges have invested a lot in manufacturing programs. All over the state, if you go to a community college, you'll see programs, equipment set up for manufacturing. If we want to find people that are getting trained there, we should be engaging there. Get to know the professors, get to know the instructors that are there so they know who you are. And when they find a student who maybe aligns to your culture, aligns to the jobs that you need to fill, they can help feed someone in that direction. Can advertise in the school paper, right? There's so many different opportunities, but we need to engage people where they are. We also know that sometimes in a lot of our minority or at least inner city communities, there are a lot of people looking for work who might be great in manufacturing. Are we putting ads? Are we communicating in the places that they're going to be looking? How can we engage in those communities to find those great people that are there who can help fill the jobs that we need to fill? So many opportunities to do a lot more in recruiting. Second thing about recruiting is we need to be leaving, maybe it's the third, we need to be leading with who we are and what we want. So when we communicate, don't be afraid to be honest about what kind of organization we have, about where we want to go, what people can expect from working in our organizations. Where do we have flexibility? Where don't we have flexibility? What's the value they're going to get by joining our team? I think if we put a lot of time into the messaging, right? Recruiting, it's like marketing. We've got to be out there telling our story, not pretending that we're something that we're not, but celebrating the great things of who we are. I think if we combine that great message with meeting people where they are, we're seeing a lot of success with people that are embracing that. I think there's a lot of opportunity for more manufacturers to do just that. And the third leg of this stool that we're talking about when it comes to workforce that we hear over and over again is about retention. The companies that are doing the best when it comes to workforce aren't the ones that are just figuring out how to engage in the community. They aren't the ones that are just figuring out how to get their message out. They're the ones that have built a great culture that focus on the people in the organization today that value them, that show them every single day what that value means, and that those people stay. The great manufacturers that we talk to that don't struggle as much are the ones that are telling us how long people stay there, that they refer their family members, that they refer their friends. Investing in retention, engaging with employees, training, giving them a career path, those things sort of become a self-reinforcing cycle because not only do those people stay longer, they get more productive, they refer other great employees, and the cycle starts over again. So having great retention strategy supplements recruitment, and those same people are out in the community saying, hey, I got this great job at XYZ manufacturer. My career is great. I'm doing this, doing that. So the people they know that want to find a great career, guess what? Hey, do you know someone that works there? Do you know someone who works there I could talk to about maybe getting a job there? So I think retention really foundationally supports those other two legs. And things we've heard from folks about what they're doing from retention, competitive wages and strong benefits. We hear that over and over again. Not saying you got to double the market pay, but be competitive and provide strong benefits. Invest in great leaders. The manufacturers that we talk to that have great retention, what we see over and over again is they have great leaders, not just at the top, not just in the C-suite, but on the production floor. in the design teams, those subordinate leaders, the people that run our folks day to day, when those people are great, when they're aligned to the company vision and mission, when they're out looking at how they can make the people that work with them better, when they're as much of a coach and a mentor as they are a boss, those are the companies that are doing super well from a retention standpoint. Also, strong communication. We see companies that are doing really well with employee retention spend and invest their time and energy at the very top of the organization in communicating. Company-wide meetings, videos, emails, depends of course on the size of the organization, how distributed it is, but there's almost no such thing as over-communication when it comes to employees inside of an organization. And so really encourage manufacturers to think, am I communicating enough? And when that little tinge in your mind says maybe not, that means you got to do a little bit more. And again, thinking about the different ways to do it. There's so many modes you can communicate now, right? We've got signage in the building. We've got email. We've got video, live video meetings and recorded video. There's so many options that we can find something that works for everybody and communicate with our teams. Very, very important. Growth potential. We are seeing that manufacturers that are helping their teammates see that there's a future in which their career can advance, right? This is the difference between a job and a career, right? A job is something you do and you hope for maybe small increases over time, right? That's a job. A career is something where you can learn, grow, and develop. The organizations that have invested time to say, hey, here's a career path. Not everybody wants to grow as fast as everybody else. Not everyone wants to grow in the same way. People have different life experiences, right? We know all this intuitively, but providing those pathways to our employees so that they have an opportunity to grow, communicating it so they know it's out there, right? Celebrating the successes when people get promotions, showing how that growth can happen. The companies that do that enjoy much stronger retention rates, and we're seeing that be very, very successful. Other things we've talked about on the podcast this year is flexibility. You know, for a long time, manufacturers I saw resisted any type of flexibility. Oh, we've got to be here to do our work. This is how we do it. You know, we got to break it this time. There's just been a bunch of I can'ts instead of how can we? And one of the things I think that came out of this pandemic that's been really helpful and will hopefully be long lasting is we started to take some of those I can'ts and figure out the how can we's. And so we're seeing a lot more flexibility across the workforce. Obviously, there's some of the work from home capabilities. We've heard about that. We've also talked to manufacturers who switched to a 4-day work week. Doesn't work for everybody, but it does work for some, where they said, hey, instead of doing 5 8-hour days, what if we did 4 10s? We only have to set up and take down 4 times a week instead of 5. Maybe we can actually squeeze more productivity by working a couple extra hours, right, when we're already in the motion, than we would do if we had to do it a different day, right? In that situation, customer service and sales are 5 days a week, but the manufacturers are only 4 days a week. And then, by the way, when you have to go to extra overtime, instead of pushing that to a weekend, now you can just work on some Fridays, right? So that's a really interesting way to be flexible with the workforce and have a unique advantage, because how many people get to come in and say, hey, every week's a 3-day weekend? Really interesting. We also talked to some people who realized that daycare is a really big problem when it comes to workforce, especially post-pandemic, right? With all these daycare and taking care of people challenges. And so we've talked to manufacturers who decided to do like a 30-hour work week or a 32-hour work week. Have people who can start after the kids go to school and can be home when the kids get home from school. It's hard to take a job when you're going to spend half of your income on daycare. But in this situation, you can unlock the opportunity to have someone who can come in and meaningfully achieve things and contribute to your organization in a way that they can't in other places because they're not offering them that same level of flexibility. Those are just some of the ways that we've seen manufacturers and heard from them on how flexible they are. But the key for me is switching that mindset from the I can't to how can we? The people that are thinking about ways to be creative, they're spending the time talking to peers, reading articles, listening to podcasts, thinking about different ways to improve. Those are the ones that are making the changes that are really driving the benefits and seeing the benefits in their own organization. We're even seeing some people going above and beyond tuition assistance, helping people get involved, whether it's an MBA, even looking at things that may not be directly related to their job, but helping them grow and develop as a business person, they're investing in those folks, giving them some flexibility, helping them defray some of those costs. Really beneficial, creative things that when you think about it, actually help build your organization. The more talented the people are inside of our businesses, the more successful those businesses are. Sometimes we can't always tie how helping someone do this is going to make our business better. But one thing we see over and over again is the companies that are investing in their teammates, those are the ones that are winning. Let's talk about training. There's so much talk has been made this year about incumbent worker training, certificate training programs, so much so that the state of Connecticut is helping to pay for a lot of this. But so many manufacturers aren't taking advantage of that. And I think it's such a huge missed opportunity, whether you're getting partially reimbursed or not. Investing in training your incumbent workforce, how can that go wrong? In the worst case, they just get better at their job. What if it helps them stay longer? What if they meet other people at that training program and talk about how great their place of employment is? Maybe you get a new employee. Maybe they learn something new, bring it back to the organization and train other people who didn't even go to the training about how they can be better and the multiplication effect of that. You know, we've talked about, say, Goodwin University. That actually has mobile training labs. They can bring a training bus to your organization. All your people have to do is go into the parking lot and get some training for a short period of time. So many opportunities from a training standpoint to improve the productivity of our workforce, help improve the retention of our workforce, and all the great things that come with that. There's just so many things that we can do, and I hope more and more people take advantage of these things. At the end of the day, we've been saying it since the podcast started. The number 1, 2, and 3 challenge that we hear from manufacturers are workforce, workforce, and workforce. We spent this year hearing from so many people that have been so successful in finding ways to offset some of those risks and successfully do it. I hope I've been able to share some of those that you can go back, listen to this, take some notes, implement some of these in your business to help it improve in 2023. The other thing I want to talk about in our 2023 kickoff is cybersecurity. First, a little bit of an admission, which is that I feel awkward talking about cybersecurity and probably haven't talked about it enough on the podcast because it's some services we provide in my other life outside the podcast. And the goal for the podcast is and remains building a successful manufacturing community, and we're going to continue to do that. And part of doing that is talking about things that are important to manufacturing. And so here we go on cybersecurity. First thing I want to say is for anyone that hasn't been paying attention, you need to be thinking about cybersecurity. If you haven't been thinking about it, you need to start thinking about it. But the reality is most people are doing something. I very rarely run into anybody who's doing nothing about cybersecurity. I don't believe in that. We're too small to get hacked, right? That's something we used to hear a lot. You know, who cares about us? You know, we're not the DoD. We're not United Technologies or Raytheon, right? No one's going to care about us. And I think everyone's come to the reality that with the amount of effort and energy that gets put into live answer call centers, trying to steal $300 at a time from grandma and grandpa with fake technical support phone calls, that everybody is big enough to get scammed. And the way the scammers are working is really targeting everybody across the planet without regard to size and industry and what have you. So it's really important that everybody knows that. And I think they do. But what I think we're starting to miss is that the floor of cybersecurity has been being raised. The things that we were doing 5 years ago, stuff that we would have considered advanced, right? That only companies that were really interested in being extra secure were investing in are now base offerings for everything that we do. You know, a critical example of that I think a lot of people can connect to is multi-factor authentication or MFA, right? 5, 6 years ago, if I went to a company and said, hey, how do you guys feel about every single person having MFA when they log in? The vast majority of people said that they don't need it, and probably they didn't at that time. And so very few people had it. Whereas today, that is a base standard offering, right? Multi-factor authentication must be had. Anyone that's filled out a cyber insurance form this year knows that that's absolutely critical and crucial. And so that's just one example of how the floor of cybersecurity is being raised. Cyber training is another example, right? Where it was sort of 5 years ago, wasn't really being done that much. Maybe 3 years ago, it was optional but recommended. And today it's required. So we just need to be thinking about the cybersecurity stance that we have. And is it modernized for the risk that we have today? So in that perspective, what I'm telling everybody in leadership positions across the manufacturing spectrum is, listen, cybersecurity needs to be on your radar and on your agenda. It's something that doesn't need to be necessarily reviewed daily by the C-suite, but something that should be reviewed quarterly, twice annually, maybe once you've got a good kind of plan going, but it just can't get put on the back burner. And here's why. Cybersecurity, you're paying for it in one of two ways. You're paying for it in the way you know, which is making conscious decisions about what the right level of security is for you, paying dollars to have it in there. It could be a set of tools, policies and procedures, audits, pen tests, right? There's all kinds of different things you can get, but you're spending money, you know what you're investing in, and you know what you're getting out. The other way that you can be dealing with cybersecurity from a cost perspective is continuing to have your risk profile grow and grow and grow. We've been saying it for years. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when someone's going to get hacked, right? I mean, listen, when you're on defense, you have to be right 100% of the time. Whereas the attackers on offense only have to be right every once in a while. And there's so many different attack surfaces, so many different ways that they're thinking about breaching that it's going to be impossible, I think, to keep up all the time. We just have to reduce our chances and do the best we can to protect ourselves. And we have to be thinking about cybersecurity across three areas and continuous improvement. So you may have heard me say before, cybersecurity has three main tenets: protect, detect, and recover. And now we're saying you got to wrap that into a continuous improvement program. The good thing is, for manufacturers, we understand continuous improvement, right? We know what it means to take something, launch it, and then continue to make it better time and time and time again. And that's what we need to be doing with cybersecurity on a regular cadence, reviewing our footprint, reviewing our stance of where we are in cybersecurity from a protect, detect, and recover, what that means to our business. Every business investment decision involves risk and reward. Everyone. And cybersecurity is no different. When we make the decision to invest in multi-factor authentication, let's say, we're saying that by spending X dollars, we are going to be reducing our risk by substantially more than what we're spending, right? And multi-factor is a great example because it's so clear, right? So if let's say you've got 100 people in your manufacturing organization, you're going to put everybody on multi-factor authentication. I don't know, that's something like a $6,000 a year cost, right? Let's say. And at the same time, the amount of risk reduction by making sure that unauthorized people can't sneakily log into your network is huge, right? What does one breach cost you? And what's the likelihood that somebody could breach someone's credentials and get in? Very high. So it's a clear risk reward analysis. And that's what we have to do across our cybersecurity positioning, whether it's protection, whether it's detection, whether it's recovery. We need to understand where all those things are, and all of them need to be thought about that and continuously improved, right? The protection, the detection, and critically the recovery, right? Because if it's a matter of if not when, we got to make sure that when it happens, we can recover, right? And a lot of these things, to be very clear, aren't just about technology, right? It's not just about buying something. It goes beyond that. So I want to talk about that now, because cybersecurity has a component that we've talked about, the general cyber awareness, right? It's more than just antivirus these days, right? It's more than antivirus and a firewall. It is those things and so much more, right? And so we got to spend our time getting to know all those technical aspects and thinking about how that works. But it is more than just technology. And that's where compliance comes into play. In a manufacturing ecosystem, compliance can take on a whole different approach than it may in other areas. And the reason for that is CMMC. So if you're in the defense supply base, which I know is big across the state of Connecticut, CMMC compliance, right, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification Framework, is important to our businesses. If we want to continue to do that DoD work after time, we're going to need to be able to show that we're CMMC compliant. But that needs to be thought about beyond just that supply base. Like, what is the advantage of CMMC or having any security framework? And here's what it is. Because cybersecurity isn't just technology, it's also policies and procedures. It's proper documentation so that users, IT staff, business leaders understand the commitment to what we're doing to be secure. We understand why we're investing in it and what it means. We have an audit trail. We know how to circle back to it. And we've got an agreed upon framework that can be understood by people in other organizations. It's sort of like ISO, right? When we do an ISO certification, why do we do it? We're doing it because we know there's a defined framework that people have agreed upon and believe in. And within that framework, if we say, hey, we're ISO certified at this level, someone knows what that means. And from my perspective, that's been the critical advancement in sort of the CMMC framework beyond, say, what we saw with NIST 800-171, is that we've got levels so people can decide what level they want to be in. It's an agreed upon framework that's got standard metrics and measures that's the industry bought into. And that when you tell someone, hey, I'm CMMC level 1, I'm CMMC level 2, they know what that means. And it's something you can take to the bank. And that's something that we're seeing not just people adopting when they're in the defense supply base, but that they're adopting just because they want to have a framework to be able to know that their cybersecurity is tight, that their risk is properly managed. So let's talk about the relationship between cyber and IT infrastructure support, right? Because a lot of people put it all in one big bucket, when the reality is they're best when they're related, but they're not quite the same. So everyone's heard of a CIO, a Chief Information Officer. Well, there's also something called a Chief Information Security Officer, also known as a CISO. And they both have that chief in their title because they're peers, not in a subordinate relationship. And when we talk to organizations that are running best, what we're seeing now is the best thing to do is to have the CIO and the CISO both report to the business. Because in some cases, the CISO is looking at what IT is doing and making sure that they're maintaining compliance with the agreed upon cybersecurity posture, that they've got the tools running the way that they said they would, that we're monitoring the way they said we would, that we're reacting to the alerts the way we said we would, right? They've got to sort of be there independently and be able to report to the business, are we doing and are we executing our cybersecurity framework the way we said that we would? But yet at the same time, it's great when they're related. Well, why is that? Because if I'm running my IT organization, I've made some decisions around the tools that I'm using, the tools I'm using for my backup, the tools I'm using for my networking, for my firewall, for my VPN, for my email, for what have you, right? All the different tools. And if the organization understands those tools, your security organization understands those tools, they're in a much better position to say if they're being used correctly, to monitor them effectively, and to be able to help the business understand, are we mitigating the risks to the degree that we thought we would? So I really think it's something that we're seeing more in 2022. I believe we're going to see it more and more in 2023, which is that security and IT infrastructure support related and reporting to the business independently, working well together, but not being the same thing. So we think that that's really an important thing. And I just think that we hear people talking about security fatigue. You know, do I need to really do CMMC? Haven't we done enough? We just added this to cybersecurity last year. Do we need to do more? And the answer is it's always worth the conversation. Take your CMMC seriously. Do it for the benefit of your business, even if you don't think you're going to get it from the federal government need to. It's a great framework and something we can all build on. I think it's really important, that continuous improvement approach, right? It's not saying a blank check to security, whatever they want, they get, but it's really understanding what is the current risk that we have? How are we going to mitigate that risk? And making a business decision, is it worth it? At some point, the answer is no. Hey, this next step is a step too far today, but maybe it's not a step too far in the future, and that's the continuous improvement. Cybersecurity is a hugely important thing to every single business. It is something we need to take the time to take seriously and something that we're reviewing on a regular basis. Very important, very critical, and if it's something we can help you with, we'd be happy to do it. Thank you for spending some time with me to kick off 2023. It has been and continues to be a great privilege and a whole lot of fun to do these podcast episodes. I learn a ton from all of our guests, and I hope you do too.
Made in America with Ari Santiago is brought to you by CompassMSP.
Thanks for listening and spending some time with me today. My goal is to help build a strong manufacturing community, and it would be impossible to do without all of you.